Mother Bear blocked the ICU door to guard a fragile baby. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the quiet corridors of Riverside Medical Center at 3:47 a.m. Dr. Maya Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she made her final rounds through the neonatal intensive care unit. The premature baby in room 204 had been fighting for his life for 3 weeks now, born at just 28 weeks, weighing barely 2 pounds. His tiny chest rose and fell with the help of a ventilator, each breath a small victory against the odds. Maya paused outside the room, watching the monitors display his vital signs through the glass window. Baby Oliver's parents had gone home for a few hours of much-needed rest after spending days by his side. The nurses had assured them they would call immediately if anything changed. Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest as she looked at the fragile infant. In her 15 years as a neonatal specialist, she had seen countless miracles, but she had also witnessed heartbreak that stayed with her long after her shifts ended. The hospital sat on the edge of Millbrook, a small town surrounded by dense forests that stretched for miles. It was unusual for wildlife to venture this close to the building, but lately there had been reports of a mother bear and her cub spotted near the hospital grounds. The maintenance staff had mentioned seeing tracks around the back entrance, the one that led directly to the ICU wing. Maya made a mental note to remind security to keep an eye out during their patrols. As she turned to continue her rounds, a strange sound echoed through the hallway. It wasn't the familiar beeping of monitors or the quiet conversation of night shift nurses. This was something else entirely. A low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. Maya froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone. The sound came again, deeper this time, and unmistakably animal. Nurse Rebecca Torres was restocking supplies in the medication room when she heard it too. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the vials she was carrying. In her 8 years working the night shift, she had never heard anything like it. The sound was coming from the direction of the back entrance, the seldom-used door that staff only opened for deliveries or emergencies. Maya moved quietly down the hallway, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished floor. As she approached the back entrance, she could see something blocking the doorway. At first, her tired mind couldn't process what she was seeing. The shape was too large, too dark, too impossible to be real. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim emergency lighting, the truth hit her like a physical blow. A massive brown bear stood in the doorway, her thick fur catching the overhead lights. She was enormous, easily weighing 400 pounds, with powerful shoulders and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to be scanning the hallway. But what made Maya's breath catch wasn't just the presence of the bear itself. It was the way the animal was positioned, deliberately blocking the entrance, as if she was guarding something precious. Behind the mother bear, barely visible in the shadows, a small cub pressed close to her legs. The baby bear couldn't have been more than a few months old, its fur still soft and downy. Maya realized with growing alarm that the mother bear wasn't trying to get into the hospital. She was already inside, and she was protecting her young. The bear's massive head turned toward Maya, and their eyes met across the 20 feet of hallway that separated them. For a moment that stretched into eternity, neither moved. Maya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, mixing with the steady beep of Oliver's monitors from the nearby room. The bear's eyes were remarkably expressive, filled with an intelligence that made Maya's skin prickle with an emotion she couldn't name. Something was wrong with this picture. Something that went beyond the obvious impossibility of a wild bear standing in a hospital corridor. The mother bear's posture wasn't aggressive. She wasn't rearing up on her hind legs or baring her teeth. Instead, she stood calm and alert, her head slightly tilted as if she was listening to something only she could hear. Maya's medical training kicked in, overriding her initial shock. She needed to alert security without making any sudden movements that might startle the bear. As she slowly reached for her phone, she noticed something that made her pause. The bear's attention wasn't focused on her at all. The animal's gaze kept drifting toward room 204, toward the soft sounds of Oliver's ventilator and the quiet beeping of his monitors. Rebecca appeared at the other end of the hallway, having heard the commotion. When she saw the bear, her face went pale, but she had the presence of mind to stay perfectly still. Maya caught her eye and made a subtle gesture toward the nurse's station, hoping Rebecca would understand and call for help. The bear shifted slightly and Maya's heart nearly stopped, but instead of moving toward them, the massive animal turned her attention even more intently toward Oliver's room. Her ears twitched at every sound from the monitors, every mechanical breath the ventilator helped the baby take. It was as if she could sense the fragile life fighting for survival just beyond the walls. Maya had read about animals displaying unusual behavior before natural disasters or medical emergencies. Dogs that could detect seizures. Cats that seemed to know when their owners were ill. But this was different. This was a wild bear, with no connection to human medicine or hospitals. Yet she seemed drawn to the one room that housed the most vulnerable life in the entire building. The cub made a small whimpering sound, and the mother bear immediately lowered her massive head to nuzzle her baby. The gesture was so tender, so unmistakably maternal, that Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Here was a mother protecting her young, just as Oliver's parents had spent weeks desperately hoping their son would survive. As Maya watched, transfixed by the impossible scene unfolding before her, she began to notice other details that made the situation even more mysterious. The bear's fur was damp, as if she had traveled a long distance in the night air. There were small twigs and leaves caught in her coat, suggesting she had pushed through dense underbrush to reach the hospital. But most puzzling of all, there were no signs of forced entry. The back door stood open, but the lock wasn't broken, the frame wasn't damaged. How had a 400-pound bear managed to open a door designed to keep intruders out? Maya's phone buzzed softly in her pocket, startling her. She glanced down to see a text from Rebecca. Security on way. Keep her calm. But as Maya looked back at the bear, she realized that the animal was already calm. More than calm, she seemed purposeful, as if she belonged exactly where she was standing. The soft sound of Oliver's monitors continued to drift through the air, and with each beep the mother bear's ears would twitch slightly. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the direction of the sound, and Maya began to understand that this wasn't a random encounter. Somehow, impossibly, this wild animal had been drawn to the hospital by the same instinct that drove her to protect her own cub. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the main corridor, and Maya knew security would arrive any moment. She had to make a choice that could determine the outcome of this extraordinary situation. Would she let them handle this as a dangerous animal intrusion, or would she trust her instincts that something deeper was happening here? As the mother bear continued her vigil, her massive form silhouetted against the doorway, Maya realized she was witnessing something that would change her understanding of the connections between all living things. But she also knew that the next few minutes would be crucial, not just for her and the bear, but for the tiny life fighting for survival in room 204. The sound of heavy boots on linoleum grew louder as security approached. Maya's mind raced through possible scenarios, each one more dangerous than the last. If the guards came in with their usual protocol for dealing with wild animals, they would likely try to corner the bear, force her to retreat, But cornered animals were unpredictable, especially mothers protecting their young. The thought of what could happen if the bear panicked and charged through the ICU made Maya's blood run cold. She held up her hand as two security guards rounded the corner, their faces a mixture of disbelief and alarm when they saw the massive bear blocking the doorway. The older guard, Jim Patterson, had worked at Riverside for 12 years and had dealt with everything from disorderly patients to small fires, but nothing had prepared him for this. His hand moved instinctively toward his radio, but Maya caught his eye and shook her head firmly. "Don't call animal control yet," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Something's not right about this situation." Jim's eyebrows shot up. "Dr. Chen, that's a wild bear in our hospital. We need to get it out of here before someone gets hurt." But Maya had spent the last few minutes observing the bear's behavior, and every instinct she had developed as a doctor was telling her that this animal wasn't here by accident. The way the bear kept turning her attention toward Oliver's room, the almost protective stance she maintained in the doorway, the complete lack of aggression despite being in an unfamiliar environment surrounded by strange smells and sound. "Just give me a few more minutes," Maya said, surprising herself with her own certainty. "I think she's here for a reason." The younger guard, Marcus Webb, looked skeptical. "Bears don't have reasons, Dr. Chen. They follow instincts, food, territory, protecting cubs, and right now, that cub is what's making her dangerous." As if responding to the mention of her baby, the mother bear made a soft chuffing sound and looked down at the small cub pressed against her legs. The baby bear had been remarkably quiet throughout the entire encounter, but now it made a small mewing sound that was almost identical to the cry of a human infant. The sound seemed to trigger something in the mother bear. Her massive head lifted, and she took a step deeper into the hallway, moving with surprising grace for such a large animal. But instead of approaching Maya and the guards, she moved toward the wall that separated the corridor from Oliver's room. She pressed her nose against the cold surface, sniffing deeply, and then did something that made everyone watching freeze in amazement. She placed her enormous paw against the wall and held it there, as if she could somehow reach through the barrier to touch whatever was on the other side. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The bear was directly opposite Oliver's incubator. Somehow, through walls and medical equipment and all the complex technology that surrounded the premature baby, this wild animal had pinpointed his exact location. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered from her position near the nurse's station. She had been watching the scene unfold with growing wonder and fear. How could she know? But Maya was beginning to understand that they were witnessing something that couldn't be explained by normal logic. She had heard stories from other doctors about animals that seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to sense illness or distress in humans. Service dogs that could detect seizures before they happened. Cats that would curl up next to patients who were close to death. Horses that could calm children with autism in ways that no human could achieve. The mother bear kept her paw pressed against the wall for several long seconds, and during that time, something remarkable happened. The steady beeping of Oliver's heart monitor, which had been slightly irregular for the past hour, suddenly steadied into a strong, consistent rhythm. Maya's eyes widened as she watched the readout on the portable monitor she carried. The baby's vital signs were actually improving. "Dr. Chen." Rebecca's voice carried a note of excitement mixed with disbelief. "Look at his oxygen levels." Maya checked the readings again, certain she must be misreading the numbers. But there was no mistake. Oliver's blood oxygen saturation had jumped from 89% to 94% in the span of just a few minutes. For a premature baby with underdeveloped lungs, that kind of improvement was extraordinary. The mother bear seemed to sense the change too. She lifted her paw from the wall and made another soft chuffing sound, this one almost satisfied. Then she turned her attention back to her own cub, nuzzling the small bear with such tenderness that Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. "We need to call Doctor Harrison," Maya said, referring to the chief of staff. "And animal control, but tell them not to approach until we figure out what's happening here." Jim Patterson looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Maya's tone made him nod instead. He stepped back down the hallway to make the calls, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb the bear. As the minutes ticked by, more staff members began to arrive. Word had spread quickly through the hospital that there was a bear in the ICU wing, and despite orders to stay away, several nurses and orderlies found reasons to pass by the area. Each time someone new appeared, the mother bear would lift her head and assess the newcomer, but she never showed any signs of aggression. It was as if she understood that these humans were not a threat to her or her cub. Dr. Elena Harrison arrived 20 minutes later, her usually perfect hair disheveled from being woken in the middle of the night. She was a small woman in her 50s, but she carried herself with the authority of someone who had run one of the region's best hospitals for over a decade. When she saw the bear, she stopped dead in her tracks. "Maya, please tell me this is some kind of hallucination brought on by too many double shifts," she said, but her voice lacked any real hope that this might be the case. "I wish I could," Maya replied. "But Elena, you need to see something." She led the chief of staff to a position where they could both see the portable monitor displaying Oliver's vital signs. His numbers have been improving steadily since the bear arrived. Elena studied the readouts with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 30 years in medicine. Oliver's heart rate was strong and steady. His oxygen levels were the best they had been since his birth, and even his brain activity pattern showed signs of improvement. "This is medically impossible," Elena said finally. "Premature babies don't just suddenly improve like this without intervention." "I know," Maya said. "But look at her." She nodded toward the mother bear, who had settled into a sitting position near the wall, her cub curled up between her massive paws. "She's not leaving. It's like she's standing guard." Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching the remarkable scene. The bear's breathing was slow and steady, her dark eyes alert but peaceful. Occasionally, she would tilt her head slightly, as if listening to sounds that the humans couldn't hear. "There's something else," Rebecca said, approaching them carefully. "I've been monitoring all the babies in the unit, and Oliver isn't the only one whose condition has improved. The twins in room 207 are breathing easier, and little Sarah in 205 is showing better brain activity than she has all week." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just Oliver who was responding to the bear's presence. Somehow, this wild animal was having a positive effect on all the most vulnerable patients in the ICU. "We need to document everything," Elena said, her scientific mind taking over despite the impossibility of the situation. "Times, vital signs, behavioral observations. If this is really happening, we need proof." As they spoke in hushed tones, the mother bear suddenly lifted her head and looked directly at Maya. For a moment, their eyes met across the corridor, and Maya felt something pass between them. It wasn't communication in any way she could understand, but it was definitely a connection. The bear's expression seemed almost grateful, as if she was acknowledging that the humans were allowing her to continue whatever she had come here to do. The cub stirred in its mother's protective embrace and made a small sound. Immediately, the mother bear lowered her massive head to nuzzle her baby, licking its small face with gentle strokes of her tongue. The tenderness of the gesture brought tears to Maya's eyes, reminding her powerfully of the way Oliver's mother would stroke his tiny hand through the openings in his incubator. Dr. Harrison, Jim Patterson returned, his expression troubled. Animal control is on their way, but they're bringing tranquilizer guns. They say it's standard protocol for large predators in enclosed spaces. Elena looked at Maya, then back at the peaceful scene of the bear caring for her cub. How long until they get here? 20 minutes, maybe 30 if we're lucky. Maya's mind raced. If animal control arrived with tranquilizers, they would sedate the mother bear and remove her from the hospital. But what would happen to the babies who were showing such remarkable improvement? What if the bear's presence was somehow crucial to their recovery? "We can't let them sedate her," Maya said, the words tumbling out before she had fully formed the thought. "Not yet, not until we understand what's happening here." Elena stared at her. "Maya, you're talking about interfering with animal control officers doing their job. The liability alone could shut down this hospital." "But what if she's helping them?" Maya gestured toward the ICU rooms. "What if we're witnessing something that could change how we treat premature babies? We could be looking at a breakthrough in neonatal care, and we're going to end it because we're afraid of a bear who hasn't shown a single sign of aggression." The mother bear seemed to sense the tension in their conversation. She lifted her head again and made a low sound, not quite a growl, but something more complex. It was almost as if she was trying to communicate, to explain why she was there and what she needed them to understand. The sound had an immediate effect on the monitors in Oliver's room. The baby's heart rate, which had been steady, suddenly spiked, then settled into an even stronger rhythm than before. It was as if the bear's vocalization had somehow resonated with the infant, encouraging his tiny heart to beat with more confidence. "Did you see that?" Rebecca breathed. "It's like she's talking to him." Maya made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career, regardless of how this situation ended. "Elena, I need you to buy me time. Tell animal control there are complications, that they need to wait for backup or special equipment. Anything to keep them from coming in here with tranquilizers for the next hour." "Maya, I can't." "1 hour," Maya interrupted. "Give me 1 hour to figure out what's really happening here. If I'm wrong, if she shows any sign of aggression, or if the baby's conditions worsen, then we'll let animal control do their job. But if I'm right, if this bear is somehow helping these children, then we need to find a way to document it and understand it." Elena looked at the bear, then at the monitors showing Oliver's improving vital signs, then back at Maya's determined face. In all their years working together, she had never seen the young doctor so passionate about anything. "1 hour," she said finally. "But the moment anything goes wrong, we're calling this off." As Elena walked away to make the difficult phone call to animal control, Maya found herself alone in the corridor with the most extraordinary patient she had ever encountered. The mother bear watched her approach with calm, intelligent eyes, and Maya had the strangest feeling that the animal understood exactly what had just been decided. Maya took a tentative step closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance from a wild predator, but something deeper, something that connected to her very core as a healer, urged her forward. The bear's dark eyes never left hers, but there was no menace in that gaze. Instead, Maya saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. Recognition. The bear knew her. Not in the way animals might remember a human who had fed them, but in some deeper, more profound way. It was as if the massive creature could see into Maya's soul and understand her dedication to saving lives, her desperate need to help the fragile babies under her care. "What are you doing here?" Maya whispered, her voice so soft it barely disturbed the air between them. "What do you want?" The mother bear tilted her massive head slightly, and Maya could have sworn she saw understanding flicker in those intelligent eyes. Then, slowly and deliberately, the bear turned her attention back to the wall that separated them from Oliver's room. She pressed her nose against the cold surface again, but this time she made a sound that was unlike anything Maya had heard before. It was a low, rumbling hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. The sound was almost musical, rising and falling in a pattern that reminded Maya of a lullaby. As the bear continued her strange song, Maya noticed something incredible happening on her portable monitor. Oliver's brainwave patterns were changing. The jagged, irregular lines that had characterized his premature neural activity were smoothing out, becoming more organized, more like the patterns of a full-term baby. Maya rubbed her eyes and looked again, certain she must be hallucinating from exhaustion and stress. But the readings were clear. Oliver's brain was responding to the bear's vocalizations in ways that defied every principle of neonatal medicine Maya had ever learned. "Rebecca," she called softly, not wanting to interrupt the bear's extraordinary performance. "I need you to see this." Rebecca approached cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. When she saw the monitor readings, her face went pale. "That's impossible," she breathed. "Premature babies can't just develop neural organization overnight." The bear's humming continued, and now Maya could hear something else, a faint response coming from Oliver's room. The baby was making sounds, tiny mewling cries that seemed to match the rhythm of the bear's song. Maya had never heard Oliver make such sounds before. His underdeveloped vocal cords had barely produced more than the faintest whisper since his birth. "He's responding to her," Maya said, her voice filled with awe. "Somehow, they're communicating." The bear's cub, who had been sleeping peacefully between its mother's paws, suddenly lifted its small head and added its own voice to the strange duet. The baby bear's sounds were higher, more plaintive, but they harmonized perfectly with both its mother's deep humming and Oliver's fragile cries. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to the impossible concert. 3 babies, 1 human, and 2 bears, separated by walls and species barriers, somehow finding a way to connect through the most primal of bonds. The need for comfort, for safety, for the reassurance that they were not alone in a frightening world. "Dr. Chen," Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper, "look at the other monitors." Maya turned her attention to the portable screens that showed the vital signs of all the babies in the ICU. Every single one of them was showing improvement. Heart rates were stabilizing, oxygen levels were rising, and brain activity patterns were becoming more organized. It was as if the bear's presence was having a healing effect that extended far beyond what any medical intervention could achieve. "This is impossible," Maya said. But even as she spoke the words, she knew she was witnessing something that transcended the boundaries of medical science. "How is this happening?" Before Rebecca could answer, they heard footsteps approaching from the main corridor. Dr. Harrison was returning, and she wasn't alone. Maya could hear multiple voices, hushed but urgent, discussing the situation in tones that suggested the news had spread throughout the hospital. "We need to document everything," Maya said quickly. "Every vital sign, every behavioral observation. Whatever happens next, we need proof of what we've seen." Rebecca nodded and hurried back to the nurses' station to begin recording the incredible data they were collecting. As she worked, Maya remained in the corridor with the bear, still mesmerized by the ongoing communication between the mother and the human baby she couldn't see. Dr. Harrison appeared around the corner, followed by Dr. James Morton, the hospital's chief of pediatrics, and 2 other senior staff members Maya didn't immediately recognize. Their faces showed a mixture of professional skepticism and genuine amazement as they took in the scene. "Maya," Dr. Harrison said quietly, "I've managed to delay animal control for 45 minutes, but they're insisting on bringing a veterinarian to assess the situation. They're concerned about the risk of disease transmission." Dr. Morton stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the monitors Rebecca was managing. "Elena, these readings can't be accurate. I've been treating premature babies for 20 years, and vital signs don't improve this dramatically without significant medical intervention." "I know what it looks like," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. "But I've been watching these babies for hours. The improvement started the moment she arrived." She nodded toward the mother bear, who had paused in her humming to listen to the human conversation. "There has to be a logical explanation, Doctor," Morton insisted. "Perhaps the presence of the animal is causing stress responses that are temporarily masking underlying problems. We could be looking at a false improvement that will crash when the adrenaline wears off." But even as he spoke, Maya could see doubt creeping into his expression. The readings were too consistent, too widespread across multiple patients to be explained by simple stress responses. Something extraordinary was happening, and it was happening in direct correlation with the bear's presence. The mother bear seemed to sense the tension in the human's discussion. She turned her massive head toward the group and made a soft chuffing sound, almost as if she was trying to reassure them. Then she did something that made everyone freeze in stunned silence. She stood up, her enormous bulk rising to its full height, and began to walk slowly down the corridor. Not toward the exit, not toward the humans, but toward the rooms where the babies lay in their incubators. Her movements were deliberate and careful, her paws making almost no sound on the polished floor. "She's going to the babies," Rebecca whispered. "She knows exactly where they are." The bear stopped in front of Oliver's room and pressed her nose against the glass window. Through the barrier, Maya could see the tiny infant in his incubator, his small chest rising and falling with more strength than he had shown since his birth. The bear's breath fogged the glass as she gazed at the human baby with an expression of such profound tenderness that Maya felt her heart breaking. "We have to let her in," Maya said suddenly, the words shocking even herself. "She wants to see him." Dr. Morton's face went white. "Maya, you're talking about introducing a wild animal into a sterile medical environment. The contamination risk alone." "Look at his numbers," Maya interrupted, pointing to the monitor. "Look at all their numbers. She's not contaminating anything. She's healing them." The bear continued to gaze through the window, and Oliver seemed to sense her presence. His tiny hand moved, reaching toward the glass, and the bear pressed her massive paw against the barrier from the other side. The size difference was incredible, the bear's paw larger than the baby's entire body, but the gentleness in the gesture was unmistakable. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Harrison said, her voice filled with wonder. "In 40 years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this." The bear's cub had followed its mother and now stood beside her, its small nose also pressed against the glass. The two bears and the human baby formed a tableau that seemed to transcend the physical barriers between them. Maya could see Oliver's eyes moving beneath his closed lids, as if he was dreaming, and his vital signs continued to show remarkable improvement. "There's something else," Rebecca said, approaching the group with a tablet full of data. "I've been comparing the babies' improvement rates, and there's a pattern. The closer they are to the bear's current position, the more dramatic their recovery. It's as if she's emanating some kind of healing energy." It was Sarah Chen, Oliver's mother, and behind her came David, his father, both of them looking terrified and confused. "We got a call," Sarah gasped, stopping abruptly when she saw the massive bear sitting calmly near her son's room. They said there was an emergency, that we needed to come immediately, but they wouldn't tell us what was wrong with Oliver. David's face went white as he took in the impossible scene. Is that a bear in the hospital? Where's our son? Maya stepped forward quickly, her hands raised in a calming gesture. Sarah, David, Oliver is fine. Better than fine, actually. But I need you to stay calm and let me explain what's happening. The mother bear had turned her attention toward the newcomers, but her posture remained relaxed. If anything, she seemed more interested than alarmed by their arrival. Her dark eyes fixed on Sarah's face, and Maya could have sworn she saw recognition there, as if the bear understood that this was the human mother of the baby she had been guarding. I don't understand, Sarah said, her voice shaking. Why is there a wild animal in the ICU? Is Oliver in danger? Before Maya could answer, a soft sound drifted from Oliver's room. It was a cry, but not the weak, barely audible whisper they had grown accustomed to. This was a strong, clear vocalization that spoke of health and vitality. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. That's Oliver, she whispered, but he's never made sounds like that before. Sarah, David, I need you to listen carefully, Maya said, her voice gentle but urgent. What you're about to hear is going to challenge everything you think you know about medicine and healing. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to stay calm for Oliver's sake. As Maya began to explain the extraordinary events of the past few hours, she watched the parents' faces cycle through disbelief, fear, and finally wonder. The bear remained motionless during the explanation, but Maya noticed that her ears were constantly twitching toward Oliver's room, monitoring every sound the baby made. You're telling us that this bear is somehow helping our son? David asked, his voice skeptical but tinged with desperate hope. The evidence is undeniable, Doctor, Harrison said, approaching the group with a tablet full of data. Your son's vital signs have improved more in the past 2 hours than they have in the 3 weeks since his birth. His lung function, brain activity, heart rate, everything is showing dramatic improvement. Sarah stared at the bear through tear-filled eyes. But how is that possible? How could a wild animal help a premature baby? The bear seemed to sense the emotional intensity of the moment. She stood slowly, her massive form rising with surprising grace, and approached the group. Maya tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but the bear's movements were deliberate and gentle. She stopped just a few feet from Sarah and sat down again, bringing her massive head closer to the human mother's eye level. For a long moment the two mothers, one human, one bear, simply looked at each other. Maya watched in fascination as something passed between them, a recognition that transcended species and language. Sarah's tears flowed freely now, but they were no longer tears of fear. She knows, Sarah whispered. She knows I'm his mother. The bear made a soft chuffing sound and tilted her head slightly, almost as if she was offering comfort. Then she did something that made everyone in the corridor gasp in amazement. She gently nudged her own cub forward, presenting her baby to Sarah as if to say, I understand. I'm a mother too. Sarah knelt down slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. The bear cub, emboldened by its mother's encouragement, took a few tentative steps toward the human woman. When Sarah extended her hand, palm up, the baby bear sniffed her fingers curiously before allowing her to gently stroke its soft fur. I can't believe this is happening, David said, his voice filled with awe. She's letting Sarah touch her cub. Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion as she watched the extraordinary interaction. The trust being displayed was beyond anything she had ever witnessed. Wild bears were notoriously protective of their young, yet this mother was allowing a human stranger to touch her most precious possession. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patricia Williams, the hospital's chief veterinarian, who had been called in to assess the situation. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the scene unfolding before her. "Dr. Harrison," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "please tell me that woman is not touching a wild bear cub while its mother watches." "Dr. Williams, I know how this looks," Maya said quickly, "but this bear has shown no signs of aggression. In fact, she seems to be facilitating contact between the families." Dr. Williams studied the scene with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades working with animals. The mother bear's body language was relaxed, her breathing steady, her posture non-threatening. The cub was clearly comfortable with the human contact, and Sarah's movements were slow and respectful. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Williams said finally. "In 30 years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen wild bears display this level of trust toward humans. It suggests a level of intelligence and emotional sophistication that we're only beginning to understand." As if responding to the veterinarian's assessment, the mother bear stood and walked slowly toward Oliver's room again. But this time, instead of simply pressing her nose against the window, she turned toward Sarah and made a gentle rumbling sound, almost as if she was inviting the human mother to join her. Sarah looked at Maya questioningly. Can I see Oliver?" "Of course," Maya said, "but I want you to be prepared. The improvements in his condition are remarkable, but he's still a very small, very fragile baby." Sarah approached the window where the bear was waiting, and together the two mothers looked through the glass at the tiny human infant who had somehow become the focus of this extraordinary gathering. Oliver was awake, his small eyes bright and alert in a way they had never been before. His color was better, his breathing stronger, and his movements more coordinated. "He looks so much better," Sarah breathed. "How is this possible?" The bear made her humming sound again, and immediately Oliver turned his head toward the window. His tiny mouth opened, and he made a sound that was remarkably similar to the bear's vocalization. The two mothers, human and bear, watched in amazement as their babies seemed to communicate across the barriers of species and medical equipment. "They're talking to each other," David said, his voice filled with wonder. "Our son is talking to a bear cub." Dr. Williams was frantically taking notes, documenting behaviors she had never seen in any textbook or research study. "This level of interspecies communication is theoretically impossible," she muttered, "but I'm watching it happen." The bear cub, encouraged by the sounds from Oliver's room, waddled over to the window and pressed its small nose against the glass. Oliver's hand moved, reaching toward the baby bear on the other side of the barrier, and the cub placed its tiny paw against the glass in response. "They're trying to touch each other," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "She saved our baby, and now they're bonding." Maya watched the incredible scene unfold, but her medical training was also processing the implications of what she was witnessing. "Dr. Williams, is there any precedent for animals displaying healing behaviors toward humans? There are documented cases of dolphins helping injured swimmers, dogs detecting seizures, even cats seeming to comfort dying patients," Dr. Williams replied. "But nothing on this scale, and certainly nothing involving wild predators and medical patients." The bear's humming continued, and Maya noticed something new happening on the monitors. Not only were Oliver's vital signs continuing to improve, but the patterns of his brain activity were becoming increasingly complex. It was as if the bear's vocalizations were stimulating neural development at an accelerated rate. "Dr. Chen," Rebecca called from the nurse's station, her voice urgent. "You need to see this. I've been tracking the improvement rates across all the babies, and there's something incredible happening." Maya reluctantly left the touching scene at Oliver's window and joined Rebecca at the monitors. What she saw made her knees weak with shock. "The babies aren't just improving individually," Rebecca explained, her voice shaking with excitement. "They're improving in synchronization. Look at these heart rate patterns, the brainwave readings, even their breathing rhythms. They're all becoming harmonized." Maya stared at the data in disbelief. 7 premature babies, each in different stages of development, each with different medical challenges, were all showing synchronized patterns of improvement. It was as if the bear's presence was creating some kind of healing field that was coordinating their recovery. "This defies every principle of medical science," Maya said. "How can individual patients be showing synchronized improvement?" "Unless," Dr. Williams said slowly, approaching the monitors with growing excitement, "we're witnessing something that goes beyond individual healing. What if this bear isn't just helping each baby separately? What if she's somehow creating a collective healing environment?" The implications of what Dr. Williams was suggesting hit Maya like a physical blow. If the bear was somehow facilitating synchronized healing across multiple patients, it would revolutionize everything medicine understood about recovery. "We need to contact the research institutions," Dr. Harrison said, her voice filled with urgency. "Harvard, Johns Hopkins, the CDC, this data needs to be verified by independent experts." But even as they discussed the scientific implications of their discovery, Maya's attention was drawn back to the human drama unfolding at Oliver's window. Sarah was crying openly now, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. The bear seemed to understand the human mother's emotions, and she moved closer, actually brushing against Sarah's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the bear. "I don't know how you knew or why you came, but thank you for saving our son." The bear looked directly into Sarah's eyes, and Maya could have sworn she saw understanding there. Then the massive animal did something that made everyone in the corridor freeze in amazement. She gently took Sarah's hand in her enormous paw, holding it with a delicacy that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature. For a moment, the hospital corridor was filled with the most profound silence Maya had ever experienced. 2 mothers, separated by species and evolution, connected by the universal bond of love for their children. The bear's gesture was so tender, so unmistakably compassionate, that Maya felt her worldview shifting in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. "Dr. Chen?" a new voice called from the end of the corridor. Maya turned to see Dr. Robert Sterling, the hospital's chief of neurology, approaching with several other specialists. "We've been reviewing the brain activity data from all the affected patients, and we need to discuss our findings immediately." Maya reluctantly left the touching scene and joined the group of specialists. Dr. Sterling's expression was a mixture of excitement and professional skepticism. "The neural development patterns we're seeing are unprecedented," he began. "These babies are showing brain organization that typically takes months to develop, but more importantly, they're all showing identical patterns of neural firing. It's as if their brains are somehow communicating with each other." "What are you suggesting?" Maya asked, though she was beginning to suspect she knew the answer. "I'm suggesting that we may be witnessing the emergence of some kind of collective consciousness among these infants," Dr. Sterling said. "The bear's presence seems to have triggered a level of neural connectivity that we've never observed before." Maya felt the world spinning around her as the implications of Dr. Sterling's words sank in. Not only was the bear healing the babies individually, but she might be creating connections between them that could change their development in ways that science had never imagined. "How is any of this possible?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know, Doctor," Sterling admitted. "But the data is consistent across all 7 patients. Their brains are developing at an accelerated rate, and they're developing in perfect synchronization with each other. As the medical team grappled with the revolutionary implications of their discoveries, the bear continued her patient vigil. She seemed completely unaware of the scientific chaos she was causing, focused entirely on the simple act of caring for vulnerable young lives. Maya looked back toward Oliver's window, where Sarah and David were still marveling at their son's remarkable improvement. The bear had returned to her position near the glass, and both the human baby and the bear cub were pressed against opposite sides of the barrier, as close as they could get to each other. "Whatever's happening here," Maya said finally, "we're not just witnessing medical recovery. We're witnessing the emergence of something entirely new, something that could change how we understand consciousness, healing, and the connections between all living things." The bear's gentle humming filled the corridor once again, and Maya realized that their quiet hospital had become the center of a discovery that would reshape humanity's understanding of life itself. But for now, in this moment, all that mattered was the simple truth that a mother's love had found a way to cross every barrier that science thought existed. The tranquil scene was suddenly disrupted by the urgent beeping of Maya's pager. She glanced down to see an emergency code that made her blood run cold. Code Blue, Room 189, Adult ICU. Someone was dying, and they needed immediate assistance. "I have to go," Maya said, torn between her duty to other patients and her fascination with the extraordinary events unfolding in the neonatal unit. "Dr. Harrison, can you—" But before she could finish her sentence, the mother bear stood abruptly, her massive head turning toward the direction of the adult ICU. Her ears were pricked forward, alert and focused, as if she could hear something the humans couldn't detect. The bear made a low, urgent sound that was unlike any vocalization she had made before. "What's wrong with her?" Sarah asked, instinctively stepping closer to her son's window. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the bear's behavior change dramatically. The calm, nurturing presence they had witnessed for hours was being replaced by something more primal, more urgent. The bear's dark eyes were fixed on the corridor that led to the adult ICU, and she was clearly agitated about something happening there. "Dr. Chen, we need you in room 189 immediately." Dr. Harrison's radio crackled to life. "Patient is crashing, and we can't stabilize him." The bear heard the radio transmission and made another urgent sound, this one almost like a bark. Then she did something that made everyone freeze in shock. She began walking purposefully down the corridor, not toward the exit, but toward the adult ICU where the emergency was taking place. "She knows," Maya breathed. "Somehow, she knows someone is dying." Dr. Williams was frantically taking notes as the bear's behavior shifted into something she had never documented before. "This is extraordinary. She's displaying acute sensitivity to medical distress at a distance. The olfactory and auditory capabilities required for this kind of detection are beyond anything we've recorded in wild bears." Maya made a split-second decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. Instead of heading directly to room 189, she followed the bear, her medical bag in hand and her heart pounding with a mixture of professional duty and scientific curiosity. The bear moved through the hospital corridors with surprising familiarity, as if she had memorized the layout during her brief time there. Her cub followed close behind, and Maya noticed that both animals seemed to be following some kind of invisible trail that led directly toward the dying patient. "Doctor Chen, what are you doing?" Dr. Harrison called after her, but Maya was already halfway down the corridor, following the most unlikely medical consultation team she had ever imagined. When they reached the adult ICU, Maya could see the chaos unfolding in room 189. Through the glass window, she watched Dr. Rebecca Martinez and her team working frantically over a patient whose monitors showed the erratic patterns of someone in cardiac arrest. The man appeared to be in his 60s, with gray hair and weathered hands that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. The bear approached the window and pressed her nose against the glass, just as she had done with Oliver's room. But this time, her vocalizations were different. Instead of the gentle humming they had heard before, she made deep, urgent sounds that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the patient's failing heartbeat. "His name is Frank Morrison," Dr. Martinez called out when she saw Maya approaching. 62 years old, admitted 3 days ago with pneumonia. He was stable until an hour ago. Then everything started crashing. We can't figure out what's wrong." Maya looked at the monitors showing Frank's vital signs, then at the bear, who was now making the same musical sound she had used with the babies, but deeper and more intense. As the bear's vocalizations continued, something remarkable began to happen. Frank's erratic heartbeat started to stabilize. The chaotic rhythm that had been jumping wildly across the monitor began to settle into a more regular pattern. His blood pressure, which had been dangerously low, started to rise slowly but steadily. "What's happening?" Dr. Martinez asked, staring at the monitors in disbelief. "His vitals are improving, but we haven't changed any treatments." Maya pressed her face against the window, watching Frank's face for signs of consciousness. As the bear's healing song continued, the man's eyelids fluttered, and his breathing became deeper and more regular. "She's doing it again," Maya whispered. "She's healing him." But this time, there was a witness to the bear's extraordinary abilities who would change everything. Frank Morrison's daughter, Lisa, had been sitting in the family waiting area when the emergency began. Now she stood behind Maya, watching in stunned silence as a wild bear seemed to be saving her father's life. "I don't understand," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "What is that animal doing to my father?" Before Maya could answer, Frank's eyes opened. For the first time in hours, he was conscious and alert, his gaze moving around the room until it settled on the window where the bear was watching him. Instead of fear or confusion, Frank's face showed something that shocked everyone present: recognition. "Hello, old friend," Frank whispered, his voice barely audible but clearly directed toward the bear. "I wondered when you'd come." The bear's response was immediate and emotional. She pressed both paws against the window and made a sound that was part growl, part whimper, clearly communicating with Frank in a way that suggested a deep and long-standing connection. "Dad," Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. "Do you know this bear?" Frank struggled to sit up slightly, his strength returning with each passing minute. "Lisa, meet Mama. I've been taking care of her and her family for 15 years. Every winter when food gets scarce, she brings her cubs to my property. I leave out food, make sure they have shelter. We have an understanding." Maya felt the world tilt on its axis as the pieces of an impossible puzzle began to fall into place. "You know this bear personally." "She's had 4 litters over the years," Frank continued, his voice growing stronger. "Lost her first mate to hunters, raised those cubs alone. When she found a new mate and had this little one," he nodded toward the cub, "I was the first human she introduced him to. It's like she was telling him I was safe." Dr. Williams was frantically scribbling notes, trying to process the implications of what she was hearing. "Mr. Morrison, you're describing a level of trust and communication between humans and wild bears that's considered impossible by conventional wildlife science." Frank smiled weakly. "Science doesn't know everything, Doc. Mama here has more intelligence and emotional depth than most humans I've met. She knew I was in trouble tonight, didn't she? That's why she came." The bear, as if responding to her name, made the gentle chuffing sound they had heard her use with the babies. But now, Maya understood that this wasn't just instinctual behavior. This was a sophisticated communication system between two beings who had built a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. "But how did she know you were here?" Maya asked. "How did she find you in a hospital 20 miles from your property?" Frank's answer sent chills through everyone present. "Mama doesn't just take care of her own cubs. She's got this sense about things, this ability to know when any young one is in trouble. Human babies, bear cubs, even injured animals in the forest. She's like a guardian angel, but with claws and teeth." Maya thought about the 7 premature babies who were continuing to show miraculous improvement, and suddenly everything made sense. The bear hadn't come to the hospital by accident. She had been drawn there by her extraordinary ability to sense vulnerable young lives that needed protection. "You're saying she's done this before?" Dr. Harrison asked, having caught up with the group. "Helped human children?" 3 years ago, there was a car accident on the mountain road near my place," Frank explained. "Family with 2 small kids got trapped when their car went off the road. Search and rescue couldn't find them for hours, but Mama led them right to the crash site. The parents said she stayed with the children the whole time, keeping them warm and calm until help arrived." Lisa was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the realization that her father's mysterious friend had traveled across the county to save his life. "She really came all this way just for you?" The bear seemed to understand the emotional intensity of the reunion. She moved away from the window and gently nudged her cub toward Frank's room, as if she was introducing her baby to the human who had been such an important part of their lives. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Martinez called from inside the room. "His recovery is unprecedented. All his organ functions are returning to normal levels. I've never seen anyone bounce back from multi-organ failure this quickly." Maya watched the monitors in amazement as Frank's vital signs continued to improve to near normal levels. But more importantly, she was beginning to understand that they weren't just witnessing random acts of animal healing. They were seeing the culmination of a relationship built over years of trust and mutual care. "Frank," Maya said, approaching the window where he could see her clearly, "we need to ask you about something important. Since Mama arrived at the hospital, 7 premature babies in our neonatal unit have shown remarkable improvement. We think her presence is somehow facilitating their healing." Frank's face lit up with understanding. "That sounds like Mama. She's got this gift, this way of knowing what living things need to survive. I've seen her calm, frightened animals, help injured birds, even seemed to know when my old dog was dying and spent the whole night with him." Dr. Williams looked up from her notes, her expression a mixture of scientific skepticism and growing wonder. "Mr. Morrison, you're describing behaviors that challenge everything we know about wild animal psychology and capabilities. Maybe it's time science learned something new," Frank said simply. "Mama's been teaching me for 15 years that there's more to this world than what we can measure and categorize." As if summoned by their conversation, the bear returned to the window and made her gentle humming sound. Immediately, Frank's monitors showed another spike in improvement, but this time Maya noticed something else happening. Her radio crackled to life with reports from the neonatal unit. "Dr. Chen, you need to know that all 7 babies are showing coordinated improvement again. Their vital signs are synchronizing, and we're seeing neural activity patterns that suggest they're somehow aware of what's happening in the adult ICU." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. The babies were responding to Frank's recovery, as if the bear's healing abilities were creating connections not just between herself and individual patients, but between all the vulnerable lives under her protection. "They're all connected," Maya realized. Somehow, Mama is creating a network of healing that extends beyond individual patients. She's not just treating symptoms, she's creating a community of mutual support and recovery. Frank nodded slowly. That's what Mama does. She doesn't just help one animal at a time. She creates families, brings together creatures that need each other. I've seen her introduce orphaned cubs to adoptive mothers, guide lost animals to safety, even seem to arrange partnerships between creatures that normally wouldn't interact. The implications of Frank's words hit Maya like a physical blow. If the bear could create connections between patients, facilitate communication and mutual support among vulnerable individuals, it would revolutionize not just medicine, but humanity's understanding of consciousness and community. Dr. Chen, Rebecca's voice came through the radio again. Something else is happening in the neonatal unit. The baby's parents have started arriving. All of them, even though we didn't call them. It's like they sensed their children needed them. Maya looked at the bear, who was now sitting peacefully beside Frank's window, while her cub played gently near her feet. The animal's dark eyes met hers, and Maya saw something that made her question everything she thought she knew about intelligence and wisdom. The bear wasn't just healing patients. She was reuniting families, creating communities of care and support that extended far beyond the physical boundaries of the hospital. Somehow, through her presence and her extraordinary abilities, she was teaching them all that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about connecting what belonged together. "Frank," Maya said, her voice filled with awe and gratitude, "how do we thank someone who's just shown us that everything we thought we knew about healing was incomplete?" Frank smiled and placed his hand against the window where Mama's paw was pressed against the glass. "You don't thank her with words, Doc. You thank her by learning what she's trying to teach us, that every life is connected to every other life. And when we take care of each other, miracles happen." As Maya watched the touching reunion between the man and the bear, who had saved each other's lives in countless ways over the years, she realized that their hospital had become something unprecedented. Not just a place of medical treatment, but a laboratory for understanding the deepest mysteries of consciousness, connection, and the healing power of love that transcends every boundary science had ever imagined. The first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital windows, casting a golden glow over the extraordinary scene. Maya looked at her watch and realized that nearly 8 hours had passed since Mama first appeared in their corridor. 8 hours that had changed everything she thought she knew about healing, about consciousness, and about the invisible threads that connect all living beings. "Dr. Chen," Rebecca's voice came through the radio one final time, but now it carried a tone of pure joy. "All 7 babies are stable, more than stable, they're thriving. Oliver's parents want to speak with you." Maya made her way back to the neonatal unit, where she found a scene that would remain etched in her memory forever. All 7 sets of parents had gathered in the corridor, their faces glowing with tears of gratitude and wonder. In each room, their premature babies lay in their incubators, but the machines that had sustained them for weeks were now showing readings that indicated they were ready to breathe on their own. Sarah Chen was holding her husband David's hand as they watched their son Oliver through the window. The baby, who had been fighting for every breath just hours before, was now moving his arms and legs with strength, his eyes bright and alert as he looked around his small world with curiosity rather than struggle. "Dr. Chen," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "how do we even begin to thank you for what happened here tonight?" Maya looked through the window at Oliver, then back at the corridor where Mama and her cub were preparing to leave. The mother bear had completed whatever mission had brought her to the hospital, and now she was ready to return to the wild with her baby. "You don't thank me," Maya said softly. You thank her, and you remember what she taught us, that healing happens when we take care of each other. Frank Morrison had been moved to a regular room, his recovery so complete that Dr. Martinez was calling it the most remarkable medical turnaround she had ever witnessed. As Mama approached his new room for one final goodbye, Frank pressed his hand against the window and spoke words that would echo through the hospital for years to come. Thank you, old friend, for reminding me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. Mama placed her massive paw against the glass one last time, and in that moment, everyone watching understood that they were witnessing something sacred. The bond between a man and a wild animal who had chosen to trust each other, to care for each other, to save each other when salvation seemed impossible. As the bear and her cub made their way toward the exit, something magical happened. Each baby in the neonatal unit made soft cooing sounds, as if they were saying goodbye to the guardian who had watched over them. The synchronized symphony of infant voices created a melody that seemed to harmonize with Mama's gentle humming, creating a song of gratitude that filled the entire wing. Dr. Harrison stood with Maya as they watched the bears disappear into the forest that bordered the hospital. Maya, this will change everything, not just for medicine, but for how humanity understands our place in the world. Maya nodded, but her attention was focused on something else. In each of the neonatal rooms, the babies were reaching toward their windows, their tiny hands stretched out, as if they could still feel the presence of the mother bear who had somehow become their protector. And in the adult ICU, Frank Morrison was smiling peacefully, his hand still pressed against the glass where his old friend had said goodbye. "Do you think we'll ever see her again?" Rebecca asked, joining them at the window. Maya thought about Frank's stories of Mama appearing whenever vulnerable lives needed protection, about her uncanny ability to sense distress and respond with healing that defied medical explanation. I think she'll show up exactly when she's needed most. As the morning shift began to arrive, bringing with it the return to normal hospital routines, Maya realized that nothing would ever be truly normal again. They had all been changed by their encounter with a wild mother whose love transcended species, whose wisdom challenged everything they thought they knew about the nature of healing. The official reports would document the medical impossibilities they had witnessed. Premature babies developing months of neural growth in a single night. A man recovering from multi-organ failure without medical intervention, synchronized healing across multiple patients with no conventional explanation. But Maya knew that the real story wasn't in the medical data. The real story was about a mother bear who had reminded them all that the most powerful medicine in the world wasn't something that could be prescribed or administered. It was the willingness to stand guard over the vulnerable, to create communities of care, and to trust in the ancient wisdom that connects every heart to every other heart. 6 months later, all 7 babies had grown into healthy, thriving children. Oliver took his first steps on the same day as the twins from room 207. Little Sarah spoke her first words, while baby Marcus from 203 clapped his hands in delight. The children who had been healed together seemed to share an invisible bond, as if Mama's gift of connection had become a permanent part of their lives. Frank Morrison returned to his property in the mountains, where he continued to care for the wild families that sought refuge on his land. Every few weeks, Mama would bring her cub to visit, and Frank would tell anyone who would listen about the night a bear taught a hospital full of doctors what healing really meant. And sometimes, when the wind was just right and the forest was quiet, visitors to Riverside Medical Center would swear they could hear a gentle humming drifting through the corridors. The nurses would smile and check on their smallest patients, knowing that somewhere in the wilderness, a guardian mother was still watching over all the vulnerable lives that needed her protection. Maya kept a photo on her desk, not of medical equipment or scientific achievements, but of two mothers, one human and one bear, standing together at a hospital window, connected by love that knew no boundaries. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by the complexities of modern medicine, she would look at that photo and remember the night when a wild animal taught her that the greatest healing happens when we remember that we're all part of the same family. The bear had shown them that miracles don't require explanations. They require only the courage to love without limits, to care without conditions, and to trust that sometimes the most impossible things are also the most true. In the end, Mama had given them more than medical miracles. She had given them a new understanding of what it means to be alive, to be connected, and to be healed by the simple but profound recognition that no one has to face their struggles alone. The mother bear had blocked the ICU door not to threaten, but to teach. And her lesson would echo through the halls of Riverside Medical Center for generations to come. That the strongest medicine is love, the greatest healing is connection, and the most powerful guardian is a mother's heart that refuses to let any child suffer alone.